Welcome, everybody. We are so happy that you are joining us today. I have one of my favorite people and a guest with me today. His name is Rick Reynolds. Hi, Rick. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Nancy. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. Rick and I got to know each other about 14 years ago when I was on staff at a church and I was over crisis marriages. And man, I did a little research on what is walking through our door and discovered that we had a lot of affairs coming in for help, a lot of sexual issues and a lot of trauma, unresolved trauma and how that impacts a marriage and people's behaviors. And you have this incredible organization called Affair Recovery.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
And it's been around now since, I guess we launched in 2011 officially. So, what that long after we started working with you guys?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you guys were lunching and we were figuring out how are we really going to help people. And, I've always had this thought like, well, why don't we just try to meet people right where they're at and give them the help that they need?
Right. And there's probably no better place to meet them at that place because that's where they need reconciliation. In some ways, the gospel is really a story of reconciliation. So,
And
it seemed to
100%.
us to be an easy thing to work with.
Yeah. So, and man, we brought your program in to the church and started groups around affair recovery and just saw so many people get better, couples restored. Some of those couples became our best volunteers. I mean, they were amazing because they'd done the hard work.
Well, and they see miracles. I mean,
Yeah.
you're at a place where you think there's absolutely no way that this can work. However, First John 1, if we walk in the light as he's in the light, we have fellowship with one another. And the beauty of that program is you're working with other couples, and that's what really helped facilitate the healing.
Isn't that true? You're right. We saw lots of miracles and lots of gut wrenching hard work as well. But doing it in community and connection really helped them recover. So, Rick, before we go there, I'd like you to just share a little bit of your own story so they can have an understanding of what brought you to this place of wanting to do affair recovery work.
My own foolishness actually got me there. Back in 1984, I had an affair on my wife, and the Lord brought some of the most phenomenal individuals into our life uh, to walk with us, to take us through it. And that's when I began to learn that it's, transformed individuals, people who have gone through this and come out the other side and just have been radically changed by the process. That's what made the difference for us. That's what gave us the hope. And they're also the ones who are able to say, hey, do this, don't do this. And through the years, the Lord just put it on my heart. How do you help couples like that? In fact, our goal is to
Mhm.
work with 50,000 couples annually.
Wow.
And so that was kind of how our organization was set up. It's using transformed individuals to work with couples in community, and we were made to be embedded in communities. It's how God created us. And that is by far the most effective way to treat infidelity.
Yeah, you told me that you've been doing a couple of research projects that you're really excited about. Could you tell us about those projects?
Well, the efficacy study we're doing a longitudinal study, which a lot of people don't end up doing longitudinal studies, but we're out some of our research as far as 3 years, 36 months. And we can show that depression, anxiety, PTSD scores, and marriage in happiness scores have gone up significantly as a result of the people in the programs working in those communities. Because to us, if we can help people find safe community, people who are like-minded, walking with them, that's what brings about a lot of the healing for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love how you've turned what was toxic for you and your marriage into a tonic for the world. And isn't that what God loves to do with our, our messed up stories and, our mistakes and some of the dumb things we all do and
Oh, I
redeem
didn't
it,
things.
right?
I didn't do anything dumb. But I was going to tell you, the second study is really interesting too. So in 2002, Peggy Vaughn, who was one of the early authors in the infidelity field, did a research study. It was help for therapists, and it was questions of what did couples do that succeeded, what helped, and what didn't help, and how effective were therapists, and what could therapists do better.
Oh,
So in our study, we just thought, well, Peggy and I became good friends. And in 2011, we were communicating and had decided we would rerun her research to see if the field had changed any. But that year, Peggy died
oh,
and of cancer. And so I was just devastated. And so I just dropped it until this year, or last year, actually. We said, let's go ahead and rerun Peggy's research and see if the field has changed very much.
uh-huh.
And it's been fascinating too. We just have kind of top line preliminary results, but we know what works for couples. At least that research is showing the ones that took the survey. And it was a large survey. I think there were over 4,000 respondents.
Wow.
And it's the ability for couples to be able to talk and communicate over time. And so often therapists have suggested, no, let's don't talk about it, right? Let's just kind of the box and move on. And the one thing they know is that does not work. But you
No.
also need some way of safety to be able to discuss it.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we're trying to help provide for people.
And you do that so well. Like, share with us some of that, maybe like exercises you have the couples do and how you help them learn how to talk about some really painful, difficult topics.
Well, I was going to say the first thing I would say is if somebody's struggling, if they would just go to affairrecovery.com and take the affair analyzer and then take the boot camp. We've had tens of thousands of people take the boot camp, and all the first steps boot camp is about is providing a format for them to be able to talk safely and productively so that they can begin understanding each other and find out what's normal. Because a lot of times it's just unrealistic expectations that mess people up. It's like, well, shouldn't you be over this by now? Uh,
Oh,
what
yeah.
what's the timeline, right? And what do you do with emotional dysregulation, that emotional flooding that happens, and how do you begin to control that?
Yes.
What can you do to keep from being traumatized in the process?
Mm.
There's so many things that we've learned that couples can do that really help. It's how do you even use the marriage? So it's that rupture in attachment that occurred that creates the
Definitely.
betrayal trauma, but also the marriage is the best tool available
Mhm.
to also begin to heal that attachment trauma. And how do you use the marriage to make that happen?
Oh, that's so good, Rick. It is. It's like the attachment's totally been ruptured, which can feel so very painful. And
Hmm.
that's why I love working with couples together because, like, let's start healing the rupture. Let's start talking about how do you find emotional containment in the midst of this so you aren't traumatized and re-traumatized and re-traumatized. That's really hard for some people, Rick. I am, especially when they have their own personal trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of this can be like, let's say they experienced maybe some sexual traumas in childhood and then a lot of rejection and abandonment around that from their parents or families or environments. And now they've had a betrayal from their spouse, their most significant attachment now in adulthood. And so they're just spinning, Rick. So how do y'all help somebody like that?
Well, part of the problem is, especially if there was a lot of developmental trauma,
Yes.
those adverse childhood experiences, what happens is you marry somebody that you think will provide the stability that you never had.
Yeah.
Then when that person betrays you. Betrayal trauma isn't something that happens to you like a wildfire. It's something that happens inside of you because it's an internal rupture with your identity and with your, it's like you don't know who you are anymore. You don't trust your past because you've been fooled. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust your mate. You don't trust your future. You don't trust reality. I mean, it completely kind of unhinges a person. It's, like I said, it's an inside out explosion. And
Absolutely.
finding that safety and safe people is really the most important thing. What most people do after betrayal trauma is they tend to isolate out of shame and out of just pain and not wanting people to know, which only exacerbates the problem. So when you're with other people going through the same thing, that affords opportunity for you to see your, that how you're responding is normal. It allows you to maybe see things in your mate through other couples, but it also, interestingly enough, some of the research, we've really started looking at social baseline theory. When someone is embedded in a community, and that's really the way we have operated as human beings, the way God made things for eons, right? There is a concept called load sharing. And the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex, which is the part of us that helps us emotionally regulate so we don't get dysregulated. That part of the brain, when you're in a group like we do, actually it goes offline. fMRIs show you don't even have to operate it handling your emotions. The group handles the emotions for you. But when you're home alone with your mate, that part of the brain is very energy intensive. And so it's difficult for a couple to stay regulated unless they're in that community. So that helps a lot.
Oh, Rick, that makes all the difference in the world. Even when I'm working with a couple, which I work with quite a few affair couples, and I really encourage them, like, yes, we can do this work together, and I'd love you to do the affair recovery boot camp. It will so regulate you. It will help you. It'll start normalizing things for you.
And especially if they can get into like EMS weekend or one of the
Yes.
EMS line courses. The advantage of that is we keep people in that cohort, that community for hopefully up to at least a year.
Oh, that's so great.
And so having that ongoing support is a really big thing, but mainly especially the weekend, it just, because you've been to the weekend, it
Yes.
just launches a couple, helps them find out there still is that attachment. Now all they have to do is continue to heal to go forward.
Yeah, I love coming to your EMS weekends. And so it's where you gather up. Gosh, how many couples typically come, Rick?
Now about
Yeah.
30,
Wow. Okay.
but they're small groups. It's not like you're doing stuff in front of 30 couples.
No, no, no. You break it down. And so they're in smaller groups and you have a team of therapists working with you. Yeah. And you walk them through some exercises that really help them like start doing the repair work.
Yeah, there has to be empathy development. I mean, as you know, attachment is, do I matter to you? Do you
Yeah.
care for me?
Yeah.
And, it doesn't feel that way after that betrayal trauma. However, over the weekend, they're able to see that actually this person really may be thinking about them and they really do care. But there has to be that heart connection where they truly get it.
Yeah.
And most people stray, they don't know how to do that.
No, no, because oftentimes there has been a lack of empathy for their spouse. Like when there's a betrayal, you're not exactly like, how will this impact my spouse? How will they feel about this? How will this affect everything about their life?
And the trauma's the other piece. Like you were saying, if somebody has childhood wounds, our research is also showing they're more likely to develop complex PTSD. Can I explain the difference between PTSD and complex PTSD?
Please do, my friend. I love when we get an opportunity to make some of these things clear. So please do.
So let's say I'm in the woods and I get attacked by a bear. That would be a single incident trauma. And you know what? I don't care what happens to that bear. I'm going to try to kill that bear. I'll do whatever to get away from that bear, but I'm not worried about hurting the bear. I just want to survive. And you can imagine the next time I go into the woods, if I'm at the same place, guess what I'm going to think about? That bear. And so the net consequence of PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, is fear. So our brain goes, danger, danger, this area is dangerous. And so we go crazy. So let's talk about developmental trauma, which is at the root of CPTSD. When a parent is abusive or is neglectful or whatever, the child can't create that relationship with that parent. I mean, that parent's her lifeline. They to have that parent. So instead of blaming the parent, what the child does is they blame themselves. And so the net consequence of developmental trauma is shame. I did something wrong. What's wrong with me? I'm bad. And it's all because you have a lifeline to that individual and you can't sever it. So you make it your fault. With betrayal trauma, it's more similar to developmental trauma. So this person, it's your lifeline. So there's this natural tendency to blame yourself. What did I do wrong? I'm so stupid. Why didn't I see it? But shame is a huge aspect of betrayal trauma in the same way it is for the child, because this is part of your existence. And there's fear, but there's also that element of shame that comes along with it. In addition, shame comes from the fact that you've been dishonored if somebody cheats on you. And it feels dishonorable to even stay with somebody who's dishonored you. And so now you've got the shame of being or even thinking about considering the relationship, especially if you made some sort of inner vow where you said, I'll never be with somebody who cheats on me.
Yes. Yeah.
And you compromised yourself because you're in that situation. And learning how to break those vows, learning that it's not about you, because nothing you did caused it.
No.
It's huge.
Oh, it's so big. I've worked with, like, let's say a woman who's been betrayed, and then she can get pressure from her family and friends like, how can you stay with him? What's wrong with you? You're an idiot. Like, he's just going to do it again and again and again. And it's like, here they already have the shame of being cheated on. And then they've got family and friends, maybe well-meaning, but nonetheless shaming them for being willing to work through it or stay, or, you know what I mean?
Oh,
And so it can be so shaming.
it really can be. In fact, in our preliminary findings, I don't know if we have to rerun everything, but it looks like one of the predictors of whether a couple splits up, is how much they talk to friends and family.
Really, Rick? Tell us about that.
Well, I just again preliminary. We don't have the stuff all finished again. We got to rerun the numbers. But yeah, it showed that one of the biggest factors that would predict a couple not staying together is a husband not husband, but the wayward spouse not being willing to talk about it, but also how much the betrayed spouse talked to friends and family. And for that very reason you just said, talking to friends and family, you end up, even if you want to work on it, you're getting pressure oftentimes not to stay in it. And so for that reason, divorce is more likely.
Wow, that is fascinating research. I can't wait to read all this new research, Rick, because think of how many people, like they're surrounded by, well, maybe a lot of family and friends. So
Right.
those are the people they're going to lean into. And yet those aren't necessarily the best people for them to lean into. And that's why an organization like yours, where we will provide the community for you, and it will be the right kind of community for you, because the answer isn't always just getting people around you. It's like getting the right people around you.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely people who have been transformed. The problem is most people surround themselves with co-conspirators, people who tell them how unjust this was, how they're victims, how they deserve better. And those co-conspirators leave them forever in that victim mentality. You
Yes.
need transformed individuals who can validate where you're at, but also tell you, hey, there's a way out of this. There are choices you can make, things you can do to heal, which kind of brings me to one other point that for the last year, I've really been studying, Nancy, and that is traumatic memories
Mm. Mhm.
and intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
So there was some research done, and it came out of Harvard, Mount Sinai, and
Mhm.
what in that research, this was October of 2023, so it's very recent. They discovered that traumatic memories actually are not hippocampal, aren't normal memories. Traumatic memories are actually stored, seem to reside in the posterior cingulate cortex, which
Mhm.
is another portion of the brain. So when you have a memory that has that cognitive entity that's stored in the posterior cingulate cortex, the PCC, every time that memory gets triggered, it feels like it just happened yesterday. You re-experience it. And the problem that so many betrayed spouses have is they have a lot of these PCC memories, and it feels like even if they're 18 months, 2 years, 3 years down the road, every time those memories come up to them, there's no time lapse still just now. So they're still feeling the same intensity. They never heal. And those PCC memories can stay in place for like 50 years.
Mm.
Uh, I mean, I had one from junior high school where a kid, my first junior high dance, he told me when I came off the floor that I danced like a retard. Well,
Mm.
the problem is every time I got on a dance floor for the next 50 years, you know,
Yep.
that whole thing, that's verbal trauma. And I would just feel that same feeling I felt back in seventh grade.
Mhm.
Well, it's the same thing with betrayal trauma. There's so many of those memories. And so how do you move forward
Mhm.
if you're still experiencing everything
Mhm.
from the trauma?
Mhm.
And so one of the things I've done is started using a technique where I can convert PCC memories to normal hippocampal memories, where they fade into where they just seem like it. Okay, so the affair happened 2 years ago. The affair
Mhm.
happened 15 months ago, but it feels like it's 15 months ago. It doesn't feel like it's happening now,
Mhm.
which actually allows that individual, when they go through that process, to begin to really work on the relationship and see it as it is today, rather than always having to see it as it was what they're re-experiencing back
Mm.
during the affair. And it's made a huge difference in trauma scores.
Rick, that is tremendous because that is some of the most painful parts of this in the recovery process is just something, who knows what, right? One of those triggers, a smell, a sight, a thought, a sound.
Place, location, a
Yes,
date,
yes.
song.
The phone ringing, an email, a text, and all of a sudden that person is right back there.
They're right back there. And because that part of the brain can't tell time. And
Mm.
so it's like, yeah, I know you may have changed, but it still feels like nothing's different because I
Yeah.
keep experiencing it the same way.
Yeah. Rick, what's your methodology for helping people with that?
So what I'm doing is a technique called peripheral eye stimulation,
Mm.
and I can do about one memory every 20 to 30 minutes. But what I've discovered in about 2 to 2.5 hours,
Uh-huh.
typically people's PCL5 trauma scores will
Yeah.
drop over 50%.
Ooh.
So that, I mean, you take out the very worst ones and it targets just the specific memory.
Mm.
So there are three types of traumatic memories betrayed spouses really struggle with. One is verbal trauma.
Uh-huh.
So if they read text, that's a verbal trauma.
Yeah.
Like I
Yes.
was working with somebody the other day and she'd read a text that said something like, I love my wife, but you have done something to me I've never experienced, and I love you deeply. Now, so every time he would say, I love you to his wife, guess what would happen?
Yep.
And she would go right back
Mm.
to D-Day.
Mhm.
At the end, after about 15 to 20 minutes, she was going, I love my wife. I don't remember the rest of it.
Mhm.
And so it was just gone. So that's one.
Wow, Rick. That's amazing. I love that. That is
The-
such a grace for people's brains.
Right, to be able to heal and not
Yeah.
to, she knew what happened. It's
Yeah.
not that she forgot what happened or anything, but it didn't have the take your breath away, ruin your day,
Yeah. Rip your
break.
guts out, right? Throw you way back there again. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. I just get excited about that.
The second one is things they witnessed. They may have seen pictures, they may have
Mhm.
seen events, they may have seen certain things. So
Mhm.
witnessed ones, again, you target that specific memory and using the peripheral eye stimulation, literally it creates what's called a prediction error in the brain. Think about your mind and then your brain.
Mhm.
So you're totally bypassing this. You're just focused on what they witnessed, that visual memory. When there's a mismatch that occurs or that prediction error, it unlocks that neural network at a molecular level.
Mm.
And that memory becomes very malleable.
Mhm.
And so then what I'm doing is I'm overriding the memory with basically the blank optic nerve. So
Mhm.
the lateral gynonucleate nucleus in your thalamus changes which optic nerve is active every 6 seconds.
Fascinating.
So what I'm doing is overriding the memory with the blank optic nerve so that when they think of it, they can still see it, but there's no emotion associated. Well, the emotion is greatly reduced.
Mhm. Mm.
Then the third type of memory, betrayal trauma effects, is called imagined scenarios. So let's say you get too much information and disclosure,
Mhm.
and you're able to paint a picture in your head of how you think it looked and what happened. You create a video.
Oh, yeah.
And those become PCC memories, and those
Mhm.
intrusive thoughts will come up all the time. With imagined scenarios, interestingly enough, frequently, and I think it's because they're probably encoded a bit differently, but frequently those memories just you're able to practically make it so you can't even see it anymore.
Wow.
For safe.
Gosh, that's incredible.
It really is. It's been
Yeah.
really exciting to
Now, Rick, is this similar to brain spotting or no? Okay, not
no,
at all. Okay.
not at all. And it's different than EMDR. So
Okay.
with EMDR and brain spotting, there's still the mind is
Mhm.
still processing. This is part of emotional transformation therapy. With ETT, when everything shifts, the person's going, that is really weird. What just happened? Because this part of the brain is not even doing anything. You're
Wow.
just taking a synaptic network, a neural network, and altering that network without this part of the brain being involved.
Wow, Rick, this is tremendous. So I'm assuming you received training in this and, or tell me about more about that.
Well, so I'm an ETT therapist. I'm a trainer for ETT, but the
There you go.
protocol, this is something I developed over time just because I get so much betrayal trauma.
Yeah.
I got to practice a lot till I came up with a protocol that seemed to work
Ah,
consistently.
okay. So maybe this is how long have you been practicing this, Rick?
Really started working probably last year, about this time when I found that article
Yeah.
from, see, I'll tell you the name of the article here. Not that any, because when I first read the article, I was having to get my dictionary out to get everything translated. I was going, what? I don't even know some of these words. It was well. So it's neural patterns differentiate from sad versus see traumatic memories. Yeah, differentiate between sad autobiographical memories and PTSD memories.
Fascinating. And so then from there, you started creating something because of your years of experience of working with betrayal
Right,
couples and trauma, and you've discovered something that helps people
right.
move.
Yeah. And so really, it was there are multiple authors, but Daniela Schiller and Anne Hapaz Rotem were the two primary researchers in this. And, ultimately, and they're the ones who came up with the idea of being able to convert PCC memories to hippocampal memories so they just
Uh,
could get normal memories that faded into the past.
Fascinating. Oh my goodness. I know so many betrayal couples that could use this kind of help, and what a difference that could make for them, right? Because those memories can become so intrusive.
Well, and they last forever. I mean, that's the problem. You learn how to try to keep them from getting triggered, but if they ever come back up again, you still feel as if it happened. The intensity is still there. That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's the problem, Rick. The person is totally thrown back like this just happened. It may have been 20 years ago, but I am now here and I am there. And I am now more there than I am here. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so intrusive to the recovery process. And,
Right.
and it can be a total disruption to the attachment, which they've been working so hard to reattach.
So currently I'm doing research on it and trying to see this personally. So people that, call and I can do it virtually. That's a nice thing. It doesn't even
Right.
have to be in person. I can send the equipment to them, run the equipment virtually, and I have about the same impact virtually as I do in person.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love that you and others are creating new ways of helping people recover from really some complex trauma.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So yeah, because infidelity, there you've got so many different things. I mean, obviously the wayward spouse has to figure out what happened, what is going on that
Mhm.
made them susceptible, and how then shall they live
Mhm.
to make sure they don't ever go here again. Again, community is everything to that.
Uh-huh.
For the betrayed spouse, they have to heal from the trauma,
Mhm.
and the couple has to heal from the attachment rupture.
Percent, right? So, Rick, people can be resistant to getting into a group. Like, no, this is nobody's business, or this is too embarrassing, or this is too shaming. And so,
Nah.
yeah, how do you help couples with that? Like,
So if you got to understand, the problem is they're feeling so much shame. The only place in the world you can feel normal is if everybody else is in the same place. At that point, you go, I'm not alone. Everybody's going through this. And that's really what people discover when they get into a group, Nancy. It's like, well, this is the first place I've been that I can feel normal.
oh, and that's such a gift, that then provides some stability, some grounding, some beautiful things that people need to even begin the healing process.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, Rick. Well, I so appreciate that. So, what about like I'm sure you've experienced couples where they go through all this, they do a lot of recovery work, and then, there's some more betrayals.
So, and it's interesting you bring that up because 5 years into my recovery, I relapsed. And
Mm.
I think what happens, the thing I've learned is, and I don't want people to relapse, but that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because that was 36 years ago.
Mhm.
And so I know you can go decades without relapsing, but I also learned what it takes to be able to go 36 years without relapsing. And the reason people relapse is because they're doing better.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And
Right.
when they start doing better, they quit living the way they need to live. They quit doing the things that made things better. And ultimately, I always say you're only as weak as your strongest link. And it's hubris that always gets us into trouble,
Mhm.
where we think, okay, I've got this, there's not a problem. And they allow themselves to get back into high risk situations
Mhm.
and things happen again because they think that they're not susceptible.
Mhm.
So you're only as weak as your strongest link. And it's true, both parties, it's not just if you're going to have a new marriage that's
Mhm.
better than before, right?
Mhm.
People have to be transformed. The marriage has to be transformed.
Yes.
Both parties need to be working at, you know, really becoming who God made them to be
Mhm.
and understanding that the way they are, God didn't make a mistake with the issues they've got. They just
Yeah.
have to learn to live with those issues. And how do I live to make sure that I stay safe?
Yeah. It's quite a bit of consistent effort over time and not getting, it's easy to get a little lazy, get a little sloppy, get a little like, oh, things are so good. We don't have to work this hard anymore. But
Mhm.
a great marriage is mostly a lot of effort.
There's a lot of effort that goes because, the second law of thermodynamics, one about entropy, if we're not continually putting into it, it slowly atrophies
Yeah, it does.
and we drift apart. And a lot of times when I see couples divorce after going through our programs, it's not even usually the infidelity that's the problem. It's their unwillingness to address other issues that were in the marriage prior to the
Yeah.
infidelities. They just didn't do the additional work, whether it was sexual dysfunction, whether it was anger issues, whether it was depression, there's so many different things that
Mhm.
end up being barriers to us, but we feel like, we can see everybody else's, we see our mate's problem for sure.
Mhm.
We just don't see our problems. I mean, you
Right.
know that one of the things that we make people say all the time is my mate is never my problem.
No.
My mate only reveals the problem in me,
Mm.
which isn't to say your mate doesn't have a lot of problems, but if you want to find out where your issues are, all you have to do is, let Stephanie act certain ways, and all of my defects of character will come flying to the surface, and I can see it clearly in how I respond to her.
Isn't that the beauty of marriage and the most frustrating part of marriage is it's such a mirror,
Hmm.
and if we have the courage to look at the mirror that's being held up in front of our face and go, oh, ouch, I've got some character defects. Ouch, I've got some things to work on. Ouch. And like I love working with couples in crisis because honestly, crisis can be the greatest gift there is to start addressing the things that have been there, but they're just going unaddressed.
Right. That's why I think infidelity, I hate it.
Yeah.
The reason couples end up, the best marriages I know have gone through it, but
Hmm.
it's because it created a crisis and
Yeah.
God was able to use that crisis as a catalyst
Hmm.
for transformation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because God doesn't want us to waste that sort of pain. He wants us to use it for transformation.
Absolutely. 100%. And, I think there's a lot of crisis opportunities in a marriage, even
Mm,
apart, even apart from infidelities or betrayals, that there's other things that happen in life and in marriage where you're just like, ouch, this is really painful. And what is our pain saying to us? And what do I need to be attuning to and attending to inside of me?
it's God's primary people growing machine. It's
Yeah.
the thing that, it's the thing that allows me to see my avoidant attachment style. It's the thing that, gets me continually trying to change that, to
Mhm.
learn how to listen, to learn to be present.
So big, right? Right, Rick? Yeah.
Mm.
To actually pause and reflect and notice what's going on inside of yourself, you know, right? Tuning in and noticing what's going on with my spouse. Where are we at? Where have we lost each other?
Right.
You know?
Do you ever ask that question of, how would you rate our marriage right now?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Or another question is like, what's it like for you to be married to me? What's it like on the other side of me?
Right.
Well, you're busy and preoccupied and your head seems to be somewhere else most of the time and you're exhausted when by the time you get home, it doesn't feel like there's anything left for us, right? I mean, these are just the things I hear couples say to each other. Yeah, even in my own marriage at times,
Oh, yeah.
you know, like, hey, where are we? Well, we've been really busy, probably overworking, probably overextended, and so it takes a toll on the marriage, and you're like, oh, now what's wrong with us? Instead of like,
Mhm.
maybe there's something wrong with the way we're living life right now.
You know, like,
Yeah. Have you found that it's typically females that are kind of the ones waving the caution flag? Like, hey, like, a lot of times with my husband too, he'll be like, oh, we're great, man. And I'm like, huh. I'd probably rate that a little differently right now. I've heard that women are kind of like the anchor, on a ship. Like we're the ones going, something's dragging here. We're not really doing okay. There's something we need to attune to. Have you noticed
oh,
that or
I find that it's not, as you know, it's not true 100% of the
no?
time, but it's
Never.
true a lot of percent of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it can feel like we women are like fun suckers, and it's like, well, that's not it. It's just there's something inside of us going, we're off. We are off. And
Well, and yeah, go on.
well, I love it in attachment theory. We learned that from Sue Johnson. We don't have to hunt the bad guy. We don't need to waste our time hunting the bad guy. There's not a bad guy here.
And marriage shows you the places that if you are tuned, shows you the places you're off. So I know one of the things I'll do is I can compartmentalize really well.
Mhm.
And I'll just leave work at work and I'll come home. But the problem with leaving work at work is there are things I need to remember to talk to Steph about. But because I'm not thinking about those things, I won't mention them. And then, like, I actually forgot to tell her, this was really embarrassing, that one of our therapists, her mother died.
Yeah.
Steph knew that her mother had been sick. And I know
Mm.
everybody's going, I can't believe she did this. But I forgot. So when we saw her at the next EMS weekend, Steph goes up and says, how's your mom?
Mhm.
And she says, well, didn't Rick tell you she died?
And you're
You
like,
know,
no.
sitting there trying to dig a hole in the ground severe because I forgot.
Uh-huh.
It's like I have to make notes. I need to remember things, right? And
Yeah.
I have to do what's necessary to make
That's
sure that that happens.
right, Rick. I mean, I sometimes like, Nancy, did you have this conversation with yourself, with Ron in your head, or did you have it out loud?
Right.
Because sometimes I'm like, well, we talked that through, right? And I'm like, no, actually, I just talked that through in my head with him, but not verbally with him. It's
Mhm.
crazy, isn't it, Rick?
It
Yeah,
really is.
it really is. And we just had our 50th anniversary, and it's like, man,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. And it's like, boy, reflecting on 50 years, it's like we're doing so well when we are putting forth effort. And then, the temptation is when things are going great and you're
yes.
having such a beautiful time of harmony that we're like, oh, we start coasting on, I don't know what, the love drugs, it's just working. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, now we're in disharmony. What happened?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What happened? Well, we probably got a little, lazy and we weren't putting forth the effort, you know.
Yeah, and it's effort. It's not work. It's not
No,
bad.
no.
It's just good. I always say it's good habit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of my favorite Dallas Willard statements is God's not opposed to effort. He's opposed to earning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference here. Yeah. No, he's not opposed to earning. Yeah. He's not opposed to earn effort. He's opposed to earning. And
Right.
so, when we're trying to earn each other's love or earn something, then we start going into performance and we start, maybe trying to, it's kind of that anxious attachment,
Oh yeah.
right? Which, the best attachment is a secure one where we have two calm adults who can open up their hearts to being connected and loving each other.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Rick, any more thoughts on like talk a little bit about, and I think you have, but anything else on intrusive thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
I'll show you one more thing.
Yeah.
And guys, if anybody out there is dealing with infidelity, I promise you, Fair Recovery is one of the absolute best resources. We've got good night, 6,000 resources in our recovery library. We've got well over 1,000 videos on YouTube. If
Wow.
you're looking for information to at least understand, take advantage um, of the work our therapists have put in putting this um, whole thing together, because we actually are very research based. We're always reading research, which brings me to one of the new ones. So if you get some information that feels really traumatic to you, if within the first 5 hours you will play Tetris for 20 minutes, you're far less likely to develop intrusive thoughts. Or if you're having intrusive thoughts and a really bad one comes, again, if you'll play Tetris within the first 5 hours for 20 minutes, there's a really good chance that the intensity of those thoughts, each time you do that, it'll lessen and eventually go away.
Wow. So, Rick, specifically, it's Tetris.
It is Tetris. That's the only
Wow.
one that they've done research on.
That's incredible. So it just distracts the part of the brain that would hold on to that memory.
Yeah. So what it does, so a memory, once it's activated, it reconsolidates within 5 hours. And in that 5 hour window, it is somewhat malleable. When you play Tetris, what it does is it works with the visuospatial portion of the brain, which interferes with the reconsolidation of the memory and lessens the intensity of the memory then.
That's incredible. It makes me think about, I watched a movie about war vets trying to recover from traumatic memories. And so they'd go to this fly fishing camp and they're out in nature. But I watch them as they're fly fishing and casting and this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And their eyes are watching the line. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
I bet that's helping
Absolutely.
put some of those memories back where they need to go, get them out of the trauma center, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the things that we're spending a lot of time on is how do we help with emotional regulation? What are
Yeah.
the things that are the most helpful?
Mhm.
And being in nature and walking, which is also a bilateral movement as you walk,
Yeah. Yes.
is one of those pieces. And even couples trying to talk, being in nature, walking,
Mm-hmm.
is one of those things that allows them to communicate because they're more regulated.
That's so good. That is such a comfort because Ron and I try to get out and to go somewhere and go to nature. And that's what we do. We go for like hours of walk and we walk and talk. And it
Right.
is so soothing. And we haven't been able to do that now for the last like 5 months. And we can we're off. And I think that's why, Rick. Like we just haven't had enough time to get out.
Right. And, I think that we're just not aware. The other thing that I have found that I've used more and more now is singing. Culturally,
Yeah.
if you think historically,
Yeah.
singing has been one of the primary ways that we connect.
That's so good.
And so it's interesting when I can get people to sing, what it begins to do in terms of toning the vagus nerve, helping them with that heart rate variability
Mhm.
and allowing them to begin to self-soothe. So
Yeah.
any of those things, singing, humming, um, even dancing, uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
music. I think the beat's about 117 beats a minute. Any of those things is really can be really helpful.
Isn't that fascinating? Because I heard some researcher say the other day something to the effect of calming the vagus nerve isn't you don't actually sit and do something really calming. You do an activity like walking, singing, dancing, movement. You've got to have movement to calm your vagus.
Yes, it's exactly right.
Where, years ago we were thinking differently about that. And there's a
And
lot of things.
meditation, which is
Yeah,
good.
right. Not bad. and some of these other things that are just maybe even more practical, can be even more soothing. So, Rick, we're about ready to wrap up. Gosh, I so appreciate you and the work you do in your organization. And because it is research-based, it's clinically sound, it has been vetted, tested, tried. It actually, genuinely, it's not a Band-Aid. It's not. It's spiritual, but it's not hyper spiritual. It's really good work that actually definitely help couples. So, dear friends, if you find yourself in a situation where you've experienced betrayal, would you please go to affairrecovery.com? And like Rick said, there's so many free resources there. There's things that are going to help you. And please engage in this very healing, transformative process. You don't have to be alone in this. And my friends, you aren't alone. Thousands of people have experienced betrayal or will, and other hurts and traumas. And so Rick and I are just here to say today to you, we don't want you alone in this process. We don't want you to fall into the well of shame that is so easy for you to step into and fall to the bottom of that hole and stay there. You deserve more than that. And there's nothing, this is not beyond hope. This is not beyond hope. There's so much hope here. So, Rick, do you have any final words for our friends that are listening?
Being alone and isolating is the worst thing that can happen. Finding others who get it is the best thing that can happen, who actually have been transformed, who can show you that you can build a life better than before.
Mm.
So search for those transformed individuals to have in your life. Get help. Those intrusive thoughts that I'm talking about, you can heal. And maybe you can find me and I'll help if you can't find anything else. But get healing. Don't stay with those things.
That's right. Rick, thank you. I love that we both love group work. We've both done a ton of it in our careers. It can have people come into my groups. I do more leadership groups nowadays, but people walk through the door with all kinds of stuff. And really, it's more like, how do we lead ourselves so we can lead others? That's really my motto for the work I do. And so they walk in, and sometimes they're just so burdened. And we as a group come around them and unburden them. And they leave looking like, literally, like you look like a different human than the one who walked through the door. Because they're lightened, the load's lightened. We aren't meant to carry these loads alone. They're too much, they're too heavy. And then we just get burdened down.
And I just want to say, as you've been in the weekends, the funnest thing about the weekends, the EMS weekends, is we always say it's Friday because everybody looks horrible. And on Sunday, just the transformation where people suddenly feel alive again.
Yeah.
That transformation is the reason I do the work.
That's right. That's
Walking
right.
that healing.
Yeah. Man, Rick, thank you. I deeply appreciate you. So grateful for the work you do. I've appreciated your friendship over the years, and that you've allowed me to be a part of what you've done and learned so much from you. So thank you. I'm grateful. Give my love to Stephanie. Yeah.
Ron, okay?
Yeah. Thanks. And thank you for being our amazing guest today. We're so grateful.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay. Well, friends, thanks for joining us, and we love you, and we really want to help you live a better life.